I used to work the register at a local gas station. Though I have since left, many strange things happened when I worked overnight. This one situation, in particular, would stay with me forever. I only worked the night shift a few days a week, usually Friday and Saturday. My shifts were long and tedious. It was just a game of trying to stay awake. The only thing I got to do was stock the shelves or occasionally help a customer. I would get a lot of drunk customers and families on road trips. Sometimes a whole group of friends, but it was pretty quiet for the most part. It was about 2 that night, and I hadn't had a customer for over an hour. I had started to doze off a bit. The desk was around the corner from the entrance, and there was a bell on the door that rang when someone walked in. Falling asleep was, therefore, not a big deal. I woke up after a few minutes after hearing the bell ring. A customer walked in a few seconds later. He looked like a 30-year-old man coming in for a beer or snack. He looked around while checking what was stocked on the shelves. I had worked in retail for a long time and knew when someone was looking for something specific. But this man was walking back and forth several times while checking out the shelves. This is pretty normal during the day, but people hardly visit gas station shops to look around at night. I looked out through the window to see if he was fueling the car, or maybe he was passing time, but there were no vehicles outside. A few minutes passed before he looked over at me and said, "Thanks." He then walked out, and I didn't know what to make of that. I thought he had stolen a small item. After a while, the whole situation left my mind, and I started getting teary-eyed again. I started filling the shelves to pass time. I couldn't remember how long I had been stocking the shelves, probably 20 minutes, but I saw a man standing at the end of the shelf I was stocking. I jumped a little as I never heard the bell ring. This guy was wearing a large hoodie and dark clothes. I immediately knew something was off. The man went to the back of the store, and I immediately went to the counter. I noticed he wasn't looking for something, but just browsing. I tried not to stare at him, but noticed that he was the same man who was there a while ago. But he had changed his clothes for some reason. I also figured out that he initially came here to survey the place before doing what he planned to do. I started to panic as the man started coming towards the counter. I could also notice something heavy in his hoodie's pocket. "Welcome back, sir. Do you need something?" I said. He only made eye contact with me. You could tell he knew what I wanted to do. He came closer to the counter without saying a word and removed a small handgun from his pocket. He grabbed a small gum box beside the counter and placed it before me. He said he just needed the gums. Confused and shocked, I didn't say anything but nervously scanned the gum box. He took $1 from his pocket and threw it on the counter while still holding the gun. He said thanks and then left. I was in total shock, trying to think of what had just happened. I reported the case to the police and called my manager, who didn't answer my calls. I'm still unsure of what the man's intentions were up to today. I am a cybersecurity analyst for a large office company in my town. I had just started my first job field, so I had to work the shift when someone else didn't want to. Working overnight wasn't as terrible as I thought. It was actually very peaceful. My job involves looking through the log files to ensure nothing sketchy happened while the crew slept. I had been in the office that night for many hours. I fell asleep often because staring at the screen for hours hurt my eyes. Falling asleep was quite easy, with no one around to keep me busy. I started setting some alarms on my phone to wake me up every hour to ensure I didn't fall asleep the entire shift. I had been doing my job for the past 4 months when this happened. I actually still work there now. It was a regular night, and my coworker had finished his night shift and left the building. I got up, turned on the coffee machine, and walked down the main hallway to do a general checkup on the building. This was my regular routine. I sat at my desk and turned on the alarms to proceed with my work. I realized 20 minutes later that I had not heard the coffee machine sound, so I checked on it. I walked down the hall to the small coffee desk and noticed there was no coffee. The coffee machine was off. I thought it was weird, but I went back to my desk. As soon as I sat down, I noticed the phone wasn't on the desk where I had left it. I checked it in my pockets and looked for it at the coffee desk. It wasn't there either. I knew for sure I had left it beside the keyboard. I started to freak out and looked around frantically. My desk was in the middle of the room, and other desks with computers were surrounding it. I felt like I was being watched, knowing someone else was in there with me. I nervously tried calling out my friend, hoping he was trying to play pranks on me. I waited for some seconds, but there was no reply. As I stood in front of my desk, I heard a shuffling sound coming from the desk in the far corner. Almost immediately, my phone's alarm rang from the opposite desk in the room. My first thought was that two strangers were in the room with me. I instantly ran out through the door. I couldn't hear footsteps behind me as I ran out. I didn't take any chances, though. I ran across the street to a neighboring gas station. I called 911 with their phone to report the unknown people in our office building. The police arrived quicker than I thought and searched the building. After searching for a few minutes, they brought out a man hiding in one of the rooms, although I didn't recognize him. The police also retrieved my phone, which was hidden in the boxes at the corner of the office. The man had a small pocket knife in his jacket. The next day, we got more information about what took place. The man was an old employee who was working there before I started my job. He told the police that he had been there to scare me and then get away with the company's laptop. It seemed like there was some information he wanted from the laptop. I didn't know what would have happened if I had chosen to stay in the office that night. I work in a Montessori school with 3 tiny classrooms for children. The classrooms are at the lower level of the church. My job is to clean them every night after classes. It takes me 2 hours to clean all the rooms. I also work the closing shift nearby, so most nights I won't get to the school until 10:30 p.m. The church shares the parking lot with an old people's home, which is directly across from the church. I would admit that many creepy things had happened at the school, but the weirdest thing happened at school a couple of weeks back. I had just finished cleaning the second room and was about to move my cleaning supplies to the third room. It was probably around 11:45 p.m., so I was running late. As I closed the hallway to the third room, I heard loud bells echoing from the church. Someone had rang the doorbell. This was the first time anyone had shown up during my shifts. Both the church and the school were closed hours before. I was a little nervous. I slowly made my way upstairs towards the door. There was one of those big doors with tinted windows on it. Trying not to be seen, I looked around the corner to see who was outside. I saw an older woman, probably 70s or 80s, standing right in front of the door. I backed away before she could notice me. I ignored it and figured she had just wandered off, and one of the attendants from the old people's home would pick her up. I went back to my cleaning and started mopping the floors, but a few minutes later I heard banging echoing through the halls. I was spooked and stopped to listen. The banging stopped briefly, followed by the old lady yelling from outside. It was hard to make out what she was saying. I went upstairs again, where I could hear what she was calling out for. She was calling for someone called Abby. The lady was repeating her name over and over. She stopped calling as I moved closer to the door. I looked around the corner. She wasn't outside anymore. I was a little unsettled, and I convinced myself someone had picked up her after hearing her yelling. I turned around and began walking back. From the corner of my eye, I saw the lady staring at me through the window beside the stairs. She looked me in the eyes and yelled, "Abby, help me." Her eyes were wide open, and her hair was long and gray. I immediately ran downstairs and locked myself in one of the classrooms. I took up my phone and called the old people's home next door. I told them the situation and asked them whether she had wandered away from them. The lady on the line told me everyone was there. She promised to double-check with security and told me to stay on the line. While I waited, I heard banging on the window upstairs. A few seconds later, the lady on the phone described the old woman's features and asked whether it was her. I replied yes, and said she kept yelling for someone called Abby. There was a small moment of silence. "Mom," I spoke softly back on the phone. She replied and warned me not to approach her and to find somewhere safe to stay, as they sent someone to get her. This got me scared. I stayed in the room listening to the repeated banging from the window upstairs. The building was very old, and I didn't know how long the windows would hold if she kept banging on them. I eventually heard male voices from the outside. They left after what sounded like a struggle. I stayed there for a moment, thinking about what happened, and then I went to finish my cleaning. Knowing the lady was still in the building across the room makes me nervous until today. I never found out who Abby was and why the lady was trying to enter the church, but I'm glad I never opened the door.